gonna try and stream it to TikTok too. It's been giving me some issues on my on my account, so we'll see if it's approved now. It looks like it's. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe not. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, so it's not going to Twitter, but we are good on Kick and Twitch. So, hello everybody, welcome back to another episode with myself, Andre Robinson, and joining me is Frank, also, aka FLW. So, got an interesting show today. We have a little bit more structured today, so Frank has come up with some questions that we'll be discussing and just answering. So if you want to kick us off, Frank, we can get started on what we're talking about today.
So the last show, we said that we would talk about how do we access peace or what peace looks like. Because I realized that for some people, we kept talking about what needs to happen in order for us to walk in peace, harmony.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, they don't really have a concept of that, mostly because all they know is what they know. And so my hope is that this discussion will help people to identify what that peace space may look like. And it doesn't necessarily look the same for everybody, but there's some ingredients that should not be included, and then there's some things that should be included. Now, I think as human beings, whether we realize it on a conscious level or not, there is the need for what I call a God space. And for a lot of people, that's necessary in their life and they don't realize it. So they end up trying to fill a space that I would call the Almighty Creator. Now I know him as a Yahweh. Some people simply call him God. In other faith spaces, they may call him Allah. My point is that we as humans have a God space, and usually it's my belief and understanding that if we don't tap into that, then usually we will find ourselves trying to fill that void with other things.
Mm-hmm.
So my first question that I guess we can talk about this question ourselves, and this will be a question that maybe those people who come back later, this question and others come back later, and or even those people who may be coming in live can maybe respond to in the chat. How do you tap into your God space? What do you do to tap? What are the things that you do to tap into your God space? So I'll start
Okay.
and I'll give you an opportunity to respond. So in other episodes, people have heard me talk about that book that maybe Big Mama, that big dusty book. For some of us, it's a big dusty book. Now, I'm saying Big Mama because it probably was a big dusty book that got passed along maybe for a generation or two. Uh, I call it the Bible. These days, people don't necessarily read a physical book because thanks to technology, you can access the Bible online. So why do I feel like that's one of the ways that I can access my God space? Because based upon my personal beliefs, that book was inspired by Yahweh. And in the book, it says that He is the Word. So He and the Word are one. So whenever I get into that word and study it, that is one of the ways that I tap into my God space. Now, there's other things, but I don't want to, usurp the question by sharing all of mine. I'm going to give you the opportunity to share yours.
Yeah, my God space is similar to yours. I did just last week finally complete listening to the full Bible in its entirety. So that was definitely a
Wow.
process. Oh, it took over a year. I don't think quite a year and a half, but well over a year of about on average 20 to 30 minutes a day of listening on an audio book while I'm walking my dog. So that was always a very peaceful time. I do it in the morning. I'll typically wake up around 5:30 and try and be out the house. excuse me, walking before 6. So very quiet time is just kind of me walking, the headphones in. So not many distractions, and I always, it always would set me up to just have a solid day. Really had given me something to kind of mull over in my mind throughout the day. And I think when you kind of read it in its entirety and kind of follow the narrative, it's much easier to connect with than in ways that I hadn't grown up, like just cherry picking or not even really knowing. I was just getting assigned random books or random scriptures to look at. So when I was doing it that way, I think that's valuable as well. I know a lot of people read the Bible like that. But for me, I had always had certain, I guess, ideas that I was supposed to, that it was a full story, which it's not. Like, I mean, you can read it in different orders. The books were written at different times. It's not necessarily chronological, so you can read it out of order. But I feel like me reading it in order and then kind of going back once I've read a full book and just kind of hearing about who wrote it, around the time period, what the overall message was. All of that kind of helped just tap me into a God space, whether I was reading the book or looking up excuse me, I'm sorry, looking up a summary of that chapter or that book specifically.
That's pretty cool. And the approach that you took in and of itself helped out a lot of people because when I said that, when I made reference to the Big Dusty book, immediately there were a lot of people that shut down because all they could see is tiny letters, a
Yeah,
book that's tattered. And let's face it, there are a lot of people who don't get into reading books, period, beyond their school days.
it's a
So you
difficult book to read.
already, right, you already changed the game by saying that you listened to it.
I do
And
think
so,
reading it does have another layer of it. Like I do plan to kind of read it word for word, but in terms of getting started, I've tried in the past to read it directly from the words, but you start to get to some names, and then you get to the point where they're listing out this person begot this person. So it's like there's a lot of daunting parts of the Bible that kind of deter people from reading it in its entirety. But yeah, the listening aspect really just helps you kind of understand it. Like I said, I kind of got into reading the Bible from watching anime and just watching different stories. And so I was like, well, if I could sit and watch a whole 1,000 episodes of this, then I can, listen to some chapters in the Bible. And so, that was what I was able to do.
Let me understand what you said. You said you got into reading the Bible as a result of anime. Is that what I heard? Explain
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, so I was just watching. I don't know. I've always kind of watched anime throughout my life. Like as a kid, Dragon Ball Z was a big anime that I was watching. Pokemon, Digimon, all of those. And I just looked at them as cartoons. So, as I was growing up, I was like, oh yeah, this is just a cartoon. It did seem a little different than like SpongeBob and maybe like Fairly Odd Parents and stuff. So it did feel like it had a little different of a message, or it wasn't necessarily so much for kids, or I could kind of feel a different type of entertainment from the anime. Um, and as I got older, I just looking for something to watch. I finally started like watching Dragon Ball Z over again as an older person. I watched some other shows like Yu Yu Hakusho, and from there, then I was just like, oh, you know what? Then that's when I realized that it's not necessarily just a cartoon; it's an anime, and then that's when I started looking into other animes, um, and then I just started really noticing that these are really good stories in general. Like, cause a cartoon, it might just have different episodes where the characters getting into different shenanigans throughout the day, but then you'll watch an anime and it has a whole narrative, a storyline, plot, and the characters are kind of in pursuit of achieving a specific goal, or trying to defeat a specific foe. And there's always just different references to the Bible in a lot of these shows and anime shows. So, and I'm like,
Really? Now that I didn't know that.
yeah, it's always well, I think a lot of movies, a lot of anime, a lot of TV, just TV shows in general have a lot of references to the Bible. I see Bible references everywhere, music, uh, really popular culture. So when you hear something being referenced so much, so it's like, okay, I enjoy watching this, and they keep referencing this book. So why would I not read this book if I enjoy this story and it's referencing this book that I've heard of a million times, but I've never read the foundation. So it was almost like a way to kind of strengthen my foundation for when I was like trying to understand some of these shows, because a lot of the animes would have, they have whole fan bases where they're breaking down what the creator meant by putting this person here. So they're talking about motifs, literary devices, and just different storytelling elements that they would use, and numbers representing, or patterns within the show being repeated. And so once I started looking at media like that, then that's when I was like, the Bible is a piece of media, a piece of literature that has been passed down. And so for a story to survive all of these years, whether you're someone who believes it or not, then you have to take some credence in the fact that it survived this long. It has such a big impact on people. You've heard all the stories, and then um, so many people have copied the same, a similar narrative, whether they tweak it here or there for their own personal reasons. That's not for us to discuss right now, but that it's always kind of leads back as the foundation for a lot of stories and narratives that I've seen. So especially in anime does talk a lot about spirituality in times, but it's also, you also have to remember it's based in a different country. So in Japan, I'm not 100% sure of their religious backgrounds, but that's how they were seeing it from being a foreigner to the people who created the anime, is trying to understand their views on God and views on religion and spiritual practices is always good. And so having something that I've grown up with, to kind of compare it to. It's like, well, if I don't know the foundations of what I grew up on, then it's kind of, it's like I'm not trying to put more studying into that. Like, going. And I've never really been into like fan pages or anything, but on YouTube you'd see a lot of people just maybe breaking down an episode, or breaking down a power system for a show. So it's just a lot of deep study. Like, I'm attracted to deep study. So like, if people want to do a little deep dive on something, then that's what kind of gets me interested. And so I was like, well, it's time to do a deep dive on the Bible. And I always watch different people break down scriptures or different books of why this was made. But since I had never read the book in its entirety, it's kind of like I wouldn't watch a breakdown of an anime show without watching the anime show first. So that's then what inspired me to start reading
So
more,
there's a
listening.
lot of fascinating things in what you just shared. So first of all, I I guess you could say I did it the other way. I had a friend of mine introduced me to anime because from a generational standpoint, I would guess that more people in your generation and the generation behind you probably are more into anime than maybe the Gen X's and the generation before that one. I was I was pleasantly surprised at exactly what you said when I was introduced to it and actually watched. Now, I didn't get deep into it just because I've got a whole lot of other things that I'm doing. But
Right.
what I'm saying is those different moral themes that are there, I had no idea that those themes were there. And then for you to take those themes and say, you know what, I'm curious about why these particular stories that I heard of in church or wherever as a kid, why I keep hearing these themes and stories over here. The other thing that's important about what you shared is that for a lot of people, they think that you have to be a rabbi or a pastor in order to read the whole thing.
Right.
They have this idea that, well, I'm not no preacher, so I don't actually need to read it like that.
Mm.
But if a person suspects that perhaps there is a almighty creator that's responsible for us. Now, of course, those of us who've gone through school, we know that there's a lot of different ideas out there. Now, I'm just going to put it out there. I don't believe that we evolved from chimpanzees or something like that. I personally, I believe that we come from a almighty creator. So if you happen to lean that way and you find out that there's a book that is sort of, for lack of another term, the manual for how to live that came down from that creator, it would make sense for you to check it out. And I also like the fact that you said you took 20 to 30 minutes a day. Most of us can do that because many of us spend 2 hours a day just scrolling on the different social media sites. So for some people who aren't sure whether they're going up or down, maybe you could just give what Dre did a try. In other words, for some people, they're not gonna read, but they are willing to listen. And if you can listen for 15 minutes a day, then maybe you might say, okay, just like in your case, Dre, once you listen to something, it made you go somewhere and get some more information about something you heard. But there's some of us who might decide to listen and say, you know what? Um, I keep hearing about such and such pastor, because you might get to a point where you say, okay, I'm listening to this, but I'm not really understanding. And that's when you take another step and
Mm-hmm.
connect with the teacher. And on YouTube, there's a plethora of them. If you're not willing to darken the doors of a building or join a study, you just got lots of options. But I want to go back. I want to go back to the actual walk, because that was clever.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of people with dogs who
Yeah.
walk their dogs, right? So that was a great strategy. Let's talk about the peace part. So, because that's what we're trying to help people arrive at.
Mm-hmm.
How might you say doing that on a daily basis contributed to your sense of peace and well-being?
Tremendously. I think we've talked about waking up early before on here. So I feel like when I'm able to, like, there's time, like last week I was sick, so I was getting over a cold. And a couple of days I would just wake up and be like, all right, yeah, it's not today. But on the day, even the days when I wasn't feeling well, when I did get up and actually did my walk, or sometimes it'll be raining in the morning and I'll use that as an excuse not to not to walk. But so yeah, I'm not perfect in it, but just kind of having it's like I'm checking off something every day. So it's like, well, if I don't do anything else today, I know that, I got a little bit of exercise. My dog got some exercise. I was outside, got some fresh air. So it's just so many positives to it. Waking up early, getting back to the house, and then just kind of having the control over my day to take it whichever direction I want to take it. So it's like I'll have some time to. I could go back to sleep if I want to for a couple of for an hour or two. Probably not an hour or two, maybe a couple of minutes, just lay down or something. I can scroll on social media when I get back, because it's like I've already started the productivity part of my day, and it's like maybe I don't have anything. My next scheduled thing is until 11 o'clock or something. So now I can choose, and a lot of times since I'm up that early and don't have anything else to do, I can choose to be productive during those times. And since I can knock out so much of my productivity work early in the day, then that just, now I'm not stressing to hit a deadline, or there's just so much. That's where the peace comes in, to where it's like, okay, I'm not pressed to finish this like 5 minutes before I got to start this next task. And so it just, I think time is a huge part of peace. So it's like having your day somewhat structured or scheduled out can contribute to your peace tremendously, because I think what ruins your peace is when you do have stressors or deadlines that that's constantly on your mind, and you're like, oh, I need to finish this. So the whole day you're thinking, oh, okay, I still got to do this. Like, I used to work out in the morning when I got back from my walk, and sometimes now I've kind of leaned towards doing it more at night, which I need to kind of break out of that, because I'll be ready to go to bed and then I'm like, oh man, I forgot to do my workout, so I got to do a workout real quick. And it's a light workout. It's just something to make sure that I'm staying active every day, but still I prefer to get that done in the morning when I can. But sometimes it doesn't work out like that. So
So, one of the things that I thought about when I was listening to you, and first of all, I like the fact that you said right up front that you're not perfect with it. I'm not perfect with my routine. Some days I read or listen less than others. So it's not about getting caught up with being perfect with it. It's about seeking to develop the habit. And my guess is that for most people, once they seek to develop the habit, they will want to do it because it has become a habit. Just like some of the bad habits we have, we can also develop good habits. But but as I was listening to you, and you talked about how having a particular schedule that you create for yourself, how that's helpful. And this is important. This is, for some people, this sounds super basic, but as someone that has worked with teens and 20 somethings, and this is true sometimes for people older than that, one of the challenges that a lot of people have is having some semblance of a schedule and routine. Let me ask you this. Do you have sort of a sketchy bedtime? Now I know that, in hardcore hip hop culture, they teach that you don't sleep at all. So
Sleep is the cousin of
you
death.
I remember when I was in my early 20s, the mentality was, you
Sorry, everyone had some technical difficulties. Big storm had just hit, knocked my Wi-Fi out, so we got disconnected. But we were just talking about um, bedtime. So yeah, you can re-ask that question, and we can just start from where we left off.
yeah, so the question was, given the fact that when you were listening to the Bible audio in the audio version and walking your dog at around 5 o'clock in the morning, did you did you have a particular bedtime that you were adhering to?
So what I typically do is I use the bedtime app on my phone. So I I have an iPhone, and so at 9 o'clock, my notification switched to do not disturb. So that's kind of the signaling for me to, like, start getting ready for bed. I try to be in bed by 10. Um, there's times when I'll miss that time. There's times where I'll get into the bed earlier than that. But 10 is my goal normally. And if for any reason, if I'm whether I'm out or whether I'm up doing something, sometimes I'm editing some videos a little bit later. I try and make that time up, throughout the day. If the next day, if I can get like a little nap or something. But yeah, for me, 10. There's nothing really going on for me after 10 o'clock. So 10, I have no problems going to bed at 10. I don't feel like I'm missing anything. No, all TV shows are on demand, so it's like I could just whatever I want to watch, I could watch it the next day. So I've gotten out of that. I need to stay up till 12, 1 o'clock. Rarely see me up till 1 o'clock on a weekday. So I walk in the mornings Monday through Friday. So on the weekends is when I'll stay up a little later or sleep in a little bit. But yeah, having that 10 o'clock time where I'm supposed to be in bed, or I know that I should be in bed, or completing most of my things by then 10 o'clock. So, and that's when I try and have my workout done by. But then, see, if I don't work out in the morning, sometimes it'll hit 10 o'clock, and I'm like, oh man, I didn't work out yet. So now I got to do, like my 10-15 minutes right before I go to sleep or whatever. So, but yeah, that's my typical bedtime.
I tell you, I tell you, Dre, you're breaking all of the stereotypes because, and I really hope that a lot of people get a chance to hear this. Of course, I wish that I had understood the importance of that kind of discipline before recently, because before I realized that, you know, we were not streaming anymore, I just kept talking because I wasn't sure.
Mm,
And I was saying that it wasn't until maybe the last 7 years that I really started to press into having some semblance of a bedtime.
mm,
Because all up until that point, I was one of those people, even though for a good part of my adult life. I was nuptial, so you would think, okay. And my ex-wife, she was that person who believed in getting up early, which meant that she often would go to bed earlier. But I might have got into bed, but I didn't stay there. I would get up and, start doing this and doing that. And, all the while, I've been hearing from mentors and people that I respected that people who weren't performing artists, because we know performing artists and people in hip hop, they've got their own schedule. A lot of them brag about going in the studio at 1 a.m. So
Yep.
if you're going in the studio at 1 a.m., you can't possibly be asleep. I think the biggest point that I'm trying to make with this particular frame of dialogue is to say that people need to develop some semblance of a system that works for them. And the body, as we probably said in a previous episode, the body has its own internal clock. And one of the things that probably would be important for all of us to do, because suffice it to say, we don't necessarily all have exactly the same sleep needs, but our body will tell us. And for some people, they start experiencing headaches or when they're not getting enough sleep. Some people, they start coming down with things more frequently. So the body starts breaking down, and that's the body's way of saying that, hey, you're not providing me the opportunity to replenish, and that's the reason why things are not quite working. And what a lot of people do is they don't really respond to their body properly. They they try to trick the body with energy drinks and so forth. And I was in a session recently, and the health professionals were saying that some of these energy drinks are dangerous.
Very
Some of
dangerous.
them have been linked to all kinds of cancer because, again, if you're drinking 2 or 3 energy drinks a day and you're getting that level of hyper caffeine and you're not getting the proper nutrients, then you're not creating peace for your body. And it's funny, Dre. As I was driving today, I happened to look off to my right, and it was an elderly woman. She was walking down the street. Of course, I don't know her story, but the thought as she was walking down the street, she was really laboring, and the thought occurred to me. I wonder if she was one of those people who, when she was young, everything goes, and then if you live that way later on, you have to pay the piper. What if we could do what you're doing, have a reasonable bedtime, and like you said, on the weekends, you give yourself some grace, to stay up later and turn up and so forth. I'm just concerned that despite all the information, the technology, in some ways, people aren't using those things to their advantage. And actually, despite all of the technology and know-how, people are actually sicker than they've ever been.
I think it comes down to the quality of the hours that you're awake, because if you're so tired that you really can't function at 100% of your capacity, which was something that I started to notice when I would try and stay up late. Like when I would go into an office, or I'd still wake up early, but then the time that I had away from the office after a commute, it might be an hour commute. It's like, oh well, I just got home, so I'm not ready to go to sleep now. I haven't had any time to myself. So a lot of people try and find that time later in the day, or late at night. They feel like that's the only time to themselves. But then the following day, now the sleep that you didn't get is now starting to creep up on you at work, and so now you're not working to the best of your abilities. You're tired at work, and now when you get home you got a headache, and so it can start. Some of the cycles that can start if you're not getting an adequate amount of sleep. And I think that goes to a quality of life. Like when you slow down your life and realize that you don't have to be moving a mile a minute to enjoy things. That's when you're like, okay, you start to I value my sleep. So it's like, I remember I used to, I think on average I was getting like 5.5, 6 hours of sleep at one point. And it felt like I was doing all this stuff during the day, trying to have a social life, whether it was back in school, like school, working at the same time. Um, Actually, quick tangent, because I was thinking about this. Back when I was in school, I was doing so much catch up, whether it's in, I was using this class period to work on homework from another class because I didn't get to sleep the night before, and so now I'm missing hours from the class that I'm in, or I would be in a class physically but not mentally there. And all of that would just start to, it builds upon itself, and it's like in a negative way. So if you have positive habits, they start to build on each other and get better over time. But if you have negative habits, things will start to diminish, and you don't even notice it until it's too late, or until you're really struggling in a class, struggling at work, or have performance improvement plans, whatever the situation may be. But that's when I started to understand the quality of my rest, because I would be like, okay, now I got to cram for a test, or times when I do have to stay up later. Now I'm only getting 2 or 3 hours of sleep, trying to take a big test that I didn't have an adequate amount of time to study for, on a lack of sleep. So always keep in mind that just because you're staying up, and if you're not using that time productively, it's better to go to sleep and feed your body. Like, looking at exercise is like paying your body, sleep is paying your body, and you want to have reserves for when you're older in life. So take care of your body now, and it'll take care of you later.
And one last thing on that note, when we sleep, that's when our cells regenerate. And so if you don't get the proper rest, you're not providing those cells the opportunity to properly regenerate. And so that means that if they're not properly regenerating, they're dying and not reproducing on the schedule that they're supposed to. And so that's how people end up looking 70 when they're 40.
Mm-hmm. I listen to your circadian rhythm. That's what people have to get in tune with. Whatever your body's telling you, go to sleep when it's time to go to sleep. Get the full amount of rest, because I see so many people, they'll stay up an extra hour, and then they'll try and squeeze in a low quality nap, throughout the day, or at a time. And so it's like, okay, you gotta look at how many hours should you get a week. Let's see, if you're getting 8 times 7, what, that's 56.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 50. So you need to be getting 56 hours of sleep a week. So now if you miss, so now if you're only getting 6 hours, what, that drop you down to 40, 42? Yeah, 42 hours. So now you're,
Wow. I
yeah.
never did the math that way. That's 14 hours less sleep.
From 8 hours to 6 hours. So you missed the whole half a day and 2 hours of rest time. So Now you're not performing at your top. That's like driving a car with low oil, where you're not putting gas in, and every time you get too low, then that's when the gears start to mesh up against each other, and then it causes problems. So that sleep is extremely important, and I look at it as just saving time, because like I look at being awake as you're using some life force. So the more you sleep, the more life force you get to preserve. So I think it's just, for me, that's kind of how I look at it, and how I convince myself to make sure I'm getting a good amount of sleep. And I really try not to compromise on that too much. Like, sleep is more important than, I could talk to somebody tomorrow, I can watch this show the next day. If I need to study something, I can, waking up early, which should give me enough time to, you know, carve out some time to study. But that's why I like to wake up early, just because, like I said, I have the ability to control what I'm doing in that time period a little bit more.
And what you're talking about is a form of leadership also, because I'm also thinking about the peer pressure factor. Now, you definitely don't strike me as the type of guy, especially at this point in your life, that really struggles in that area. But for some people who are fresh out of high school or college, just the thought of going to bed at 10 o'clock and telling their boys that they can't, because I mean, when I was in my early 20s, people didn't head out until midnight.
Yeah.
And now in Atlanta, people people hang out all week long. Before, it was this idea that most people did their hanging out on the weekend, but now they've got day parties, and you Sundays used to be the day that people stayed home and rest. Now you can turn up on Sunday. Literally in Atlanta, you could turn up every day.
Yeah. But another
So,
thing is, people have different jobs. People have different, like that. That's something that you do have to understand. Like, if you have a 9 to 5 job, you might not be able to hang out with your friend who's working a night shift, like, because you guys just have different schedules, or you might only be able to hang out with them at a specific time. So hanging out with people who match your schedule is always important, and they have to value the same things you value. So it's like, if you're someone who values sleep and there's someone who values going out, having a good time, then maybe that's not the best everyday friend for you. You might have to find someone new to hang out, especially if you're the only one who's compromised. Like, yeah, they might not have to wake up till 3 the next day to go to work at 6, but yeah, and they might just be coming fresh off of work. They still got energy, but you're supposed to be getting in the bed preparing for the next day. So those are some of the sacrifices that you have to make. But that's a internal decision that you have to make. It's not really, you can't let other people influence your sleep schedule, because it's like that's that's so personal to you. And it's like, if you don't have those boundaries of when you're going to sleep, or when's an appropriate time to be talking on the phone, too, talking on the phone, text messages, all of that is has to do with your schedule, your sleep schedule. Like, people think texting isn't hard, but a lot of times you may have to stop what you're doing in order to properly respond to somebody. So that, if somebody's texting you in the middle of, while you're into your deep work or something, maybe you're not able to respond right then, and when you're responding to them, maybe they're at their time of deep work, or maybe they're just clocking into a shift. So we never really know. But that's something that you always have to respect, and make sure that you're setting a boundary for yourself, because your rest should be above uh, being entertained or entertaining other people.
I'm trying to move off this topic, but I have to ask you this. So when you said with your iPhone, you actually can set your phone up in such a way that you stop getting disturbed at a particular time.
Yes.
Now, I know for you, this probably sounds ludicrous because you have this system that you operate. But I know people who they never turn their phone off because they feel as though, I don't know if it's just simply FOMO,
It is a form of.
but they never, and in fact, I know someone who got extremely angry when they found out, hey, what do you mean you turn your phone off? What if somebody needs you?
Mm-hmm.
How
That's
do you respond to that?
I used to that used to be something that gave me anxiety as well. It's like, oh, I don't want to miss an important call, whether my mom needs to get in contact with me. But um, the way it's set up is it just won't send you a notification. Like I can still like if I pick up my phone, I can still see that I had a message, or it'll show me that I have a missed call, but it just won't ring and kind of disturb me at that time. Um, and if somebody is if there's a need for someone to get in contact with them urgently, then they just need to call twice so it'll get past the do not disturb. So um, that helped me with mine because yeah, I really would prefer to turn my phone off completely, but with your phone, I use it as a alarm clock, just in case people like you don't want to be completely dead to the world typically. And we do so much other things on our phone, so it's like when it is my time to go to bed, I might still be on TikTok or Twitter or something scrolling, um, but still just having less distractions after a certain point in time. And then in the morning, not nobody's awake at that time, so I'm not getting as many distractions during that time either. So, but I also just feel like having that do not disturb saves me from being on the phone late at night, because that used to be something somebody called me like 9:30 or something, then all of a sudden we on the phone till 12:30 something like that. So you never really and of course there's exceptions, some like if someone does need to talk, you can do that, or like I said, they can call twice if they really need to get in contact with you. But other than that, it's like nothing should be that urgent to where you can't go to sleep and talk up to them about it the next day at a more appropriate time. And I mean, but figuring out what's an appropriate time for you. If 9 o'clock is the time when you're like, this is the time when I've done everything. Maybe your bedtime isn't until 11 or something. That's just my personal bedtime. Maybe 9 is too early for you. Maybe you go to sleep at 12 and wake up at set or wake up at 8 o'clock. So it just depends. I would all like even my bedtime schedule is short of 8 hours of sleep. I think it's from 10 to 5:30, which I don't know. That's like 7.5 hours. So I'm like 30 minutes short of 8 hours. Um, but yeah, it does the job for me. So I mean, I'm still even. I have something set, and I'm still below the target sleep time. So I know when you don't have that set already, then just imagine one night you might be getting 4 hours of sleep, another night you might be getting three. So, and then if you that short of your 56 hours for the week, who knows where that's gonna show up? Whether it's showing up in headaches, whether it's showing up in your attitude. It's a lot of things that it can affect. So just always keep that in mind.
Now, I was talking to my dad recently, and he was sharing with me that a friend of his was struggling to not sleep, but to stop sleeping.
Mm,
Now, sometimes that is a sign of either depression
mm-hmm,
and or some type of ailment. So for those people who are listening and they're saying, okay, I don't have a problem going to sleep. My problem is getting up and being active.
mm-hmm.
And so if that's you, then you might need to seek some professional help to try to work through that, because if a normal amount of sleep is somewhere around 8 hours. Most experts will say somewhere between 8 and 10, because some children actually require more than 8 hours of sleep. When I say children, I'm talking, you know,
Toddlers.
10, 12.
Mm-hmm.
Some experts say that early teens, because the growth spurt and stuff like that, they can require as much as 10 hours of sleep,
Mm.
which I was totally on the opposite end of all of that growing up. And not because of my parents, because of the decision that I made, the culture that I had embraced.
Mm-hmm.
But if a person finds themselves sleeping 15 hours a day, there's only 24.
Right.
So something's off with that. You might not be sleeping the 15 straight through, but if you look at your total day and you're averaging 15, 16 hours of sleep, that something's off with that in most cases.
Definitely off. For people struggling with sleeping, try and set a something to do in the morning. So just a lot of people sleep because it's like, oh well, I don't got to do anything until later in the day, so I'm gonna just chill, or I'm gonna just sit in bed, turn the TV on. So it's just like have one thing that you need to do, whether it's just like go check the mail, just something to get you up out of the bed, just something for you to look forward to, because like you were saying, it could be dealing with depression. So, and a lot of people can get into a cycle of depression when they don't have any set goals or anything. So, that's just one way to possibly combat that if you're struggling with depression or sleeping too much. Sleeping too much can also, like, if you're going to sleep at random time, like sometimes sleeping too much comes from a lack of sleep. So it's like you do go 2 days back to back, only 3 hours of sleep, and so then day three, now you sleep for 12 hours instead. And I don't, I don't know actually how that works. If the distribution works like that, maybe it's good, but I think it's better to try and have that routine to where you're getting a consistent amount of sleep, so you're not pulling from here. Because then sometimes people will be like, well, I slept 15 hours or yesterday, so now I only need to sleep 1 hour for the next 2 days. So people will play like you have to budget your sleep the same way you budget your money. So
Wow, that's good. Now, there's some people who are feeling some kind of way. They're in a weird space. And years ago, I can identify with this. You have a job loss, and to the point, if a person is used to getting up at a certain time and going to work or going to school, all of a sudden they're not going to work or school, then what what I've known some people to do is they get up and they go to. Now, I know a lot of the Barnes and Nobles have been getting closed down. They go to a coffee shop, they
mm-hmm.
go to a bookstore, and they hang out there for a number of hours, and they behave like they're going to work. So they may go with their laptop
Yep.
and they get up, because again, if you just, for some people, and not everybody's the same, but if you are used to getting out of the house and you're productive when you get out of the house, and you suffer a job loss, then you might be that person that still needs to get out of the house in order for you to feel productive. But you
100%.
laying around and sleeping all day and and and, and eating Doritos all day is not going to work well for you,
That's a great
because
point.
you're getting deeper and deeper into a hole.
That's a great point. And really, as you're saying that, that's why I get up early for myself. I don't get up early for a job, or that's my personal time. Like, if my job starts at 9 o'clock, then that's just the time of day it starts. But my day is already starting at 5:30. So, and that's why I think it's important. Even when I've been laid off, it's like now you still handle things business as usual. So you got to do the things that got you the good results before. If you start to revert and it's like, okay, now I'm waking up at 12 o'clock. It's like, what do I expect to accomplish now, or accept to now feel like, oh, now I got to go to sleep later, or I'm not gonna be tired at 10 o'clock now because I slept till 12, and then the next day, continuously waking up late and not really having anything that I can say that I've done for the day. Because if you wake up at 12 in 5 hours, the work day is over. So now what's left for you to where is left to apply to, what's left to you know network with. So you just kind of run out of things to do when you wake up so late in the day. But yeah, that was a good point about just making sure that, and you don't wake up early just because the job. You should wake up before, way before the job starts. Whether you have to commute, whether you're working from home, having that extra time to yourself, that's where the value in your time comes from.
Now, going back to, and I don't know how many of these questions we'll actually deal with, but I want to talk about another thing that helps put me in my God space. And actually, some people can go to We to the Source for this. Now, for me, I try to listen to music that I feel is uplift music that is going to inspire me. Now, for me, that might be a few different genres of music. Now, my go-to happens to be gospel or contemporary Christian for that purpose. But there are other genres that could do that for me as well. Sometimes it may be classical, sometimes it may be jazz. For a lot of people, music is what helps them to make that connection in their God space. Now, one of the things that's wonderful about you, obviously, you could speak more to this as the proprietor of Leader Source. What's great about music is that there's so many different genres of music. Now, for me, as someone who, as I've said in other episodes, growing up in the boogie down where, Cool Herc and all of them pull out the big speakers. So I I definitely listen to hip hop, but there's certain hip hop that I'm not gravitating to first thing in the morning because there's certain messages that I'm reaching for first thing in the morning. Now, when I'm in the gym or I'm trying to get hype or in the middle of the day, I might reach for something that's hard hitting. And for some people, now we're still talking about how do you access peace. For some people, you need to be able to switch gears. Like some people, they hop out of bed and they hop out of bed at 1002, and 1002, a plane don't even take off at 1002. It builds up to that. And I'm not saying that, you might have that personality where you light things up and you go hard. But even for those people who go hard, you still need that time and space where you go soft. And for some people, you haven't figured that out yet. And that might be where the problem lies. Because if there's a time where you should be at 7, but you've got this reputation for being at 11. The scale is only 1 to 10, but you have this reputation for being at 11 all the time. Now, because of that reputation, for some, they don't even allow themselves to experience 7 because now their reputation is, oh, people expect me to be at 11. But again, that might not that might not be sustainable long term. And so now what used to be funny and cool at 11 is coming off as abrasive, or there's other terms that people are using to describe your 11 because you never figured out how to balance that.
Hmm.
You want to speak to that a little bit, Dre?
Yeah. So people who are kind of wake up on 11, as you say, I think that kind of leads back to peer pressure. What we were talking about earlier. You know, you have an image that people associate you with, and so you feel like you always have to bring good energy. But I think that also can change if you have more time to yourself, because if you wake up right before you have to leave the house, or right before you have to go to work, then that is kind of forcing you to start up on 10, because you have to get ready to do all of your work instantly. So if you wake up a little earlier than you know you typically do, you'll have a little bit more time to take it easy. um you know Listening to music in the morning, it's difficult, as I've been doing sauce radio in the morning. So there's times when I try to keep it very smooth R&B, classic R&B. But then some mornings it's like, yeah, we need a little energy. I'm always up by the time I start the stream, because I started at 7:30. I wake up around 5:30, so I have about 2 hours to kind of figure out, where I'm at mentally. And normally I've taken my walk already, so sometimes in the morning I will play, some rap. But I do understand that not everyone wants to hear that first thing in the morning or early in the morning. So, but what's early in the morning is kind of relative, because to some people 7:30 is super early. To some people 9:30 is early in the morning. For some people 4:30 is early in the morning. So it's just like, I think it really is more dependent on who you're talking to, um, what time they're waking up, what time their first task is, or where the time they have to be somewhere. Because yeah, if you wake up 30 minutes before you have to be at work, then yeah, you need to start your day with something high energy to kind of get you mentally prepared to start your day. But if you start, you have time to wake up, just kind of lays around for a little bit, maybe you can listen to some softer music, and maybe it'll prompt you to listen to some softer music if you have some more time in your day. But yeah, if you're waking up, but that comes to lack of planning where you have to go. So it's like, if you got to be somewhere, it may only take you 15 minutes to get somewhere, but still wake up an hour before you go, so you have time to shower, brush your teeth, do everything without having to rush through it. Like you could probably, most people might try and squeeze that into a 10-minute task, but it's like, give yourself some grace, give yourself some time to just think, to breathe, take really. I think one thing people should do is have, just start off with a minute. Just put a timer on your phone for 1 minute where you just sit down and actually, like, gather your thoughts, think about what you want to accomplish that day. Should be more than a minute, but just to get started, start small with everything. Just start, even if you got to start at 30 seconds, just do it like, okay, for 30 seconds after I wake up, I'm gonna just sit here in silence for a second, let my mind kind of get calibrated to what I got to do today, and then start that little quick pause can change the entire vibe of your day.
You know what you made me think of when you were talking, Drake, because you're absolutely right. Everybody, like we've been saying all along, everybody's different. And one of the things that I'm hoping that people are thinking about is that it would probably be valuable for us to see ourselves as a part of a community. In other words, again, talking to those people who feel like it always needs to be on 1,000. But on the other side, there are also those people who feel like it should always be at two. And I think when you're in relationship with other people, you have to do your part to try to meet their need. For an example, when I'm riding with my well, I almost don't have any teenagers anymore, but when we're riding together, there's certain artists that, particularly my youngest son Asa, that he gravitates to in hip hop that wouldn't be my first choice.
Right.
But but if we're gonna ride together, I have to be willing to sacrifice my two for his seven sometimes.
Hmm. Right.
And and that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's a broad spectrum of music that can help you to get into your space. But if you are part of a family or a community, you have to figure out how to cooperate. Now, it gets tricky because as a parent, I've joked about this on here before. You know, at some point, if I'm riding with my sons and they got their tunes going, yeah, they may play five songs that don't work for me. By the
Hmm.
time we get to the sixth song, then we got to compromise because I rock with your five songs. I was able to do it. Now I can't do it anymore.
Right.
You know, but there's some parents and there are people who grow up. I don't I don't know if it's as true today as it used to be, but there's some parents who they just like real over the top. They, especially the ones who are hyper religious, they're not going to allow their children to play anything that has what sounds like a hip hop beat.
Hmm.
It's off limits,
Right.
and that's so unfair, in my opinion, to their teens because number one, as we said in a different episode, they may not be listening around you since you're forbidding it so hard. But in the world that we live in, it's almost impossible for you to keep the music away from them.
Hmm.
Now you might decide, well, you know, I'm gonna, I'm not gonna allow them to have their own cell phone. I've got all kinds of locks on their cell phone. So are you gonna keep them away from all their friends who got cell phones? So it's better to have a conversation and try to understand and try to have some kind of middle ground around the music than to just be so draconian about it because that in the end, I don't think that works most of the time.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I think yesterday morning I was doing the morning radio show and my mom had joined the stream, and so Lil Wayne he had just dropped his album last Friday, so the Carter Six, and so I'm playing some of that on there, and she actually said that she had liked some of the songs that was played on there. So
Okay.
years ago she would have never, or she's always kind of been against Wayne and just different people who I've listened to. Like she's like Drake. It was all I was always trying to find music that she would like, my dad would like, or that would just be kind of appropriate for the family to listen to for road trips and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm still not a fan of. I used to really get annoyed hearing censored music because it's like you're not saying what they really want to say, or it's just messing up the distorting the message. So but yeah, I mean, yeah, having that, I guess since I'm older now, it's not as strange. But yeah, I'm sure when we were younger, listening to the subject matter and stuff like that, of course that can be a little weird. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, now I'm old enough, we can have conversations about that. She tells me about music she listened to when she was growing up. My dad tells me about music he was listening to when he was growing up. And I'm hoping to have those same conversations with my nieces, nephews, and my kids in the future. So that I think so much of music, like, because someone can make reference, like a lot of hip hop is references. So it's like somebody can make a reference to a old movie, or have a bar about uh Friday, or last Friday or something like that. And right there you guys can make that connection, like, oh, you understood that bar, and now it's like, okay, from how do you know about that movie? And so that's the conversational aspect that comes along with hip hop, and why it is so important to the culture, because of all the references that it makes, how that reference impacts you, how that reference impacts the person next to you, how it impacts someone of color, someone who's white, someone who's Hispanic. So it's just a reference point for so many things to come.
So the last suggestion that I would make, as far as that whole God place, and I was sort of alluding to it, and I want to say that it came up in our last episode. What's interesting about the time that we live in now, and this is no indictment on any particular generation, because this is sort of true across the board, whether you Gen X, Gen Z, etc. I find that, and I know we talked about it because there were some things that you said about the whole thing about loneliness last time.
Hmm.
Part of getting into the God space, in my opinion, has to do with being a part of a community. In other words, what I think a lot of people have gotten away from is making the time in their schedule to get with people. Now, for some, they might get with a person, their romantic issue, interest. But I also think that there's sometimes a necessity for you to pull from people, because one of the things that makes the and this sometimes becomes even more problematic for folks when they leave school, because
Hmm.
in school, pretty much by force, we're in groups, we're in classes.
Right.
And for a lot of people, whether they on a conscious level or not acknowledge it, that that socialization time and that time to hang out with their friends and their people is one of the most important parts of going to school. For a lot of people, the books part of it is not why they go. In
Secondary.
fact, I always joke about a couple of buddies of mine. My commute when I was in high school was an hour each way.
Mm.
And I had these buddies of mine, they would commute the hour, but they wouldn't attend classes. They
Mm.
would they made the hour commute so they could hang out and being camaraderie with their friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a session about a month or two ago, and one of the brothers was saying that as a married working man, he realizes that he has to be very thoughtful about placing himself in a position where it's not just him and his children and him and his wife, because there are other people in the world, and we're supposed to be a part. And I say this all the time: as long as we only dealing with the people in our household, then we haven't really made the kind of extension and giving that I believe that we're supposed to community, because everybody in our house is us. You know, if that's your sister, if that's your brother, if that's your wife, that's still you. In order to get past you, you got to get out of your house. And so my point is that since I believe the creator made us to be in community, when we don't when we aren't intentional about being in community, that also affects our well-being, our peace.
Mm-hmm. I think today a lot of social media kind of tries to replace that community or that communal feel, or people will satisfy their need for community through online means as opposed to meeting up with people in person if they don't physically have to, because a lot of times people might go to a physical job location and that's their mandatory community kind of for work purposes, and then they'll go home or be in a group chat or join a live stream, something like that, in order to feel a different sense of community. That's why live streaming has become so popular. You can meet up with the same people on a consistent time, so it's not only the streamer you're looking at the community or the chat that people are participating in, and so that sometimes feels like a family. So I think people still they're gonna make their way to find some type of community, even if you're watching just YouTube videos and see people commenting. That some people have that as a sense of community. You're discussing, sharing ideas and stuff. So there's definitely more ways to be community influence, but yeah, I don't think anything really will beat being in person. Spending some time with the people that you care about, or the people who are going to hold you accountable as well. So
Now, of course, I feel like connecting with people using technology is better than nothing, but I think most people will agree that it's nothing like being in the same room with someone and experiencing their energy, because that's the part that's the part that you can't get when you are on one of the apps, one of the many apps. Now, of course, we know that we're going in the direction of virtual reality, and people feel like more and more now. Now, in some ways, that can be tricky too, because if people feel like through virtual reality they can get everything they need, that will make people feel even more like, well, why do I have to bother to put gas in my car and go all the way across town when, hey, this situation right here with VR, I can go right there.
yeah, no, I mean, I just think that's the direction we're heading in, whether we like it or not. Like whatever makes things more convenient for people, people are gonna gravitate to that. So it's like if like Google just last week, they have their where they kind of release all of their new technologies and things. So they're coming out with a more realistic FaceTime, to where it feels like people are really in the room with you. It's not necessarily holograms yet, but definitely in that direction. So yeah, I mean that's just the with technology, but then we can get to the point where maybe you can zap yourself over to somebody. So with it getting to the point it is, there's always a chance to reconnect, or it be made easier to meet up with people in general. So I mean, we can't necessarily say not sharing the physical space, or being in physical space is the main part of the community. Like, I mean, we're in community where we get onto these calls and these streams, and the people who watch it is part of a community. So, I don't devalue the online or the virtual connection and community, but because it makes it easier to connect with multiple people. But you know still, you do value the times when you do have it. I think it just makes those times that you do get to spend with people in person more special.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you because my teacher was saying that he couldn't imagine that he could communicate with people all over the world every day, for 30, 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So the technology, you can't beat that. I guess what I'm speaking to is I'm speaking to those people who have access to the technology, but the technology isn't enough for them. They need to actually, as the old Diana Ross and the Supremes song went, reach out and touch somebody. Some people actually need that physical touch in order for them to feel well. And so I guess I guess I'm talking to those people who are sort of off balance because they've allowed themselves to be, isolated.
Right.
Well, Dre, I'm gonna suggest that um, we have part three to this because I don't think I don't think it would serve our audience well for us to attempt to deal with those other questions. And we probably would have tackled more questions, but the the
Technical
power
difficulty.
outage kind of threw things off, and maybe for good reason, because I think some of the things that we ended up kind of drilling down on, particularly in around the area of sleep, is very important. There are people who are barely employed because they never figured out that their problem is that they just need more sleep. They've gotten fired from several jobs already. And I was that person because I didn't believe in sleep. I wonder sometimes how much more effective I could have been if I had understood how important sleep was. Because I remember in college, sleeping in class. Back then, I was sleep I would sleep everywhere because I was
Wherever
tired.
you could get it in, wherever you could fit in, squeeze in, close your eyes, you take that opportunity, man. I look back at my college days and I'm like, man, I really wish I wasn't working when I was in college. If I could redo school and not work, that would be a tremendous. Because I mean, at the time, I'm just like, well, I need to make money to pay my rent and make sure I got food and things like that. But when I see now just kind of how much, because I mean, I do see the value in education. So it's like now when I'm like, man, I could have had so much more time to study this or to really get a good understanding of this or get an internship or something like that. There's so many other things that I might have had time to do, but I was so focused on the money in the short term, which man, there was probably other things that I could have done in order to make sure that I had an adequate amount of money for stuff like that. But yeah, that's just something that in hindsight, and anyone who is in college currently or thinking about going to school, try and put studies before everything. I was trying to split my time between studying, social life, and actual work, and I was spread very thin over those years, and it was probably very like I was probably not even at my best self, and not even didn't even realize it because like I was just young and running off of adrenaline most of the time. So I didn't even recognize that I was running at a deficiency. So I could have
Right.
done tremendously better. Who knows where my career would be, my life would be had I gotten some more sleep. So please get your rest, eat healthy, or like I'm trying to. I know one of the questions was about physical health that we didn't get to, but yeah, make sure that you're putting the right fuel into your body. That means rest. That means the right drink water. Not just cut the sugar out as much as you can, and that's what I'm struggling to do. Right, well, not struggling, but that's what I'm doing right now. Slowly weaning myself off. I had a lot of sugar in my diet, so I had to eliminate some of my favorite snacks. But it's all for the future. So
One of the things that we agreed that we're going to deal with soon is all of the rampant scamming that's going on around the country and around the world. Uh, just to make this one quick statement without diving into it, if you get a random text message asking you to click on a link, you don't know the people or none of that, do not click on the link. Is I mean, and these scammers, they're getting more and more sophisticated. And uh, I shared something with Dre a couple of days ago, and we realized that we need to dedicate a whole show to this. It's a problem.
nobody's trying to. They have so many scams. They trying to give you a job where you only have to work 2 hours and get $100 an hour. So if somebody random is texting you something that's too good to be true, it is too good to be true. You've never seen this number. Nobody's offering you these types of positions. I'll tell you now. They they have
You
so
said
many.
you said it best, Dre. If some random person sends you a message, don't. Oh gosh. And again, for people who haven't had the life experience to know, please, you get an email like that, ask somebody. Don't try to think you coming up because you about to go down.
Hmm.
You're not coming up, you about to go down.
Yeah. Quick tip for that. If anyone is calling you, if you get a receive a call saying anything of importance, you missed something, check your email first. If you don't have an email from from said company, or if you didn't see an email that said that's how most companies will attempt to get in contact with you. They're not gonna leave a sketchy message, or they're not gonna send you a. Nobody's texting you. Nobody's sending you a WhatsApp link or a WhatsApp number. All of those you can pretty much ignore. If it says spam risk, just let it ring. Don't even entertain it. So there's a. Well, like Frank said, we'll get into a whole episode of that, but that's just a quick tip just for people. Don't answer any of those phones. Anything that somebody random is offering you, take it like a stranger. If that number is not saved in your phone and they're trying to give you something, they're trying to take something from you.
Yep,
Simple
yep,
as that.
yep. Well, this was another good one, and this one is one of the ones that I think really makes itself available for us to, you know, cut up and, and sharing parts with people. But there's certain parts of what we share that will be valuable to some people, and other parts that'll be valuable to others. Like I know some parents could benefit from what we were talking about around the music. We didn't drill down there,
Mm-hmm.
but you'd be surprised at how much that music question creates tension in a household because this young person feels like they can't be themselves around the people that they love the most.
Mm-hmm.
No, you gotta parents, you gotta have a conversation, with your teens, and that doesn't mean that you're gonna be on the same page right off, but just to ban it, I'm telling you, it's not gonna work. Not gonna work.
Indeed. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight for another episode. We had a great time making this one. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, make sure that you guys all stay blessed.